space was never truly silent. Commander Laura Hayes had heard the saying 100 times that in space, no one could hear you scream, but that wasn't entirely true. A ship had its own kind of heartbeat. The faint hum of the life support systems, the periodic click of air recyclers, the almost imperceptible vibration of circulating fluids through the hull. But now, all of that was gone. She sat strapped into her pilot chair, staring at the stars through the cracked viewport of the Endeavour. The cockpit was bathed in the ghostly red glow of emergency lights, casting long shadows across her face. She had stopped counting the days sometime after the 9th. The ship's chronometer still kept time, but what was the point? They were so far beyond charted territory that time itself felt meaningless. Her hand brushed over the lifeless console, fingers trailing across controls that no longer responded. The Endeavour was a corpse, its AI systems offline, its reactor dead, its engines silent. Even the auxiliary batteries were bleeding out, keeping them alive just long enough to let them appreciate their fate. "Commander." The voice startled her slightly, softer than usual, almost reverent, as if speaking too loudly might break the fragile calm. Lieutenant Mark Reyes floated into the cockpit, his dark hair in disarray and eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "No luck?" Laura asked, though she already knew the answer. Mark shook his head and grabbed the edge of the console to anchor himself. "I've tried cycling through every frequency again, broadband, narrowband, even the old colony distress codes. Still nothing." Laura leaned back in her seat, exhaling slowly through her nose. It was what she had expected, but hearing it aloud twisted the knife deeper. "We're too far," Mark added quietly. "Even if someone did pick it up, it would take weeks to get a response." "We might not have weeks." His words hung in the air like frost. Dr. Evelyn Cross appeared a moment later, drifting with the slow grace of zero-gravity movement. Her white undershirt was stained with sweat, and her usually precise hair floated around her like a dark halo. "Life support's holding steady," she reported, her tone clinical but her expression grim. "But the CO2 scrubbers are maxing out faster than projected. I'd give us 2 weeks before we start to notice symptoms. Maybe 3 before." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Mark snorted bitterly and pushed himself toward a bulkhead. 3 weeks. Great. Guess that means we've got plenty of time to think about it. Laura shot him a sharp look. "Lieutenant." He raised his hands in mock surrender. "Sorry, Commander. Just saying what we're all thinking." But he wasn't wrong. The tension aboard the Endeavour had become suffocating, even more than the air they were breathing. Meals had become silent, mechanical affairs. Evelyn spent most of her time monitoring systems that didn't need monitoring. Mark grew more restless by the hour, compulsively recalculating their position, as though staring at the numbers might magically conjure a solution. And Laura. Laura just kept staring at the stars. The Perseus Rift stretched before them like an endless ocean, a dark gulf littered with ancient suns. No colonies, no trade routes, no stations. They had been sent out here to chart the edge of the unknown, to boldly go, as the old Terran phrase went, and now they had gone too far. Sometimes, in the stillness, Laura thought she could hear her own heart pounding. Other times, she thought she heard voices, faint whispers in the static of the comm system, just quiet enough to make her doubt they were real. She slept little, and when she did, her dreams were full of the same image, the ship adrift, tumbling endlessly, until the stars themselves blinked out one by one. On the 12th day, she was woken not by the silence, but by a sound she hadn't heard since the reactor failed. A chirp. The comm panel. Laura ripped herself out of her harness so fast she slammed her knee into the console, ignoring the sharp pain as she scrambled toward the source of the noise. Mark was already there, hair sticking up wildly from where he had clearly been asleep at his station. "Talk to me," Laura said sharply. "I don't know yet," Mark replied, hands flying over the manual controls. "It's faint, really faint, but it's not just background radiation. It's a structured signal." Evelyn floated in moments later, still pulling on her jacket. "Human?" Mark shook his head, eyes narrowing as he boosted the signal. "No. It's different. Not anything from Earth, not anything from the colonies. The modulation is way off from Terran encryption. Laura felt a chill crawl up her spine. Play it. The cockpit filled with a series of low, resonant pulses, a repeating pattern that almost sounded like a heartbeat. Each pulse echoed through the hull, vibrating faintly against their boots. It's repeating, Mark said, breathless now. Every 60 seconds, exactly. That's not random noise. That's intelligent. Evelyn stared at the waveform on the screen. That's a distress call. Laura felt her throat tighten. Are you sure? Evelyn nodded slowly. I've seen enough automated distress patterns to recognize one. It's not human, but it's definitely a call for help. The three of them sat in silence as the signal repeated again. And again. For the first time in nearly 2 weeks, Laura felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest, a spark that had nearly gone out. Mark, she said, voice steady but charged with something new, can you triangulate the source? He glanced at her, then back at the panel. With what we've got left. Maybe. It'll drain most of our auxiliary reserves, though. Do it, Laura said. He hesitated for just a second before nodding and going to work. The cockpit lights dimmed as power was rerouted to the long-range scanners. Minutes ticked by like hours. Laura's palms were damp inside her gloves. Every passing second felt like teetering on the edge of a decision that could not be undone. Then, finally, a single blip appeared on the display, a lonely dot against the infinite black. There, Mark whispered. 20,000 clicks out. Just sitting there. Laura stared at the blip, her heart hammering. Somewhere out there, another ship, alien or not, was sending out the same desperate plea they had been. They weren't alone after all. And if they weren't alone, then maybe, just maybe, they weren't dead yet. The signal pulsed through the Endeavour like a heartbeat, each repeating tone a reminder that someone, something, was out there, just as lost as they were. Commander Laura Hayes stood braced against the cockpit bulkhead, staring at the glowing blip on the holo display. 20,000 clicks might as well have been next door by deep space standards. That's close, Lieutenant Mark Reyes said, his voice low but tinged with disbelief. Too close. If it was anything dangerous, we'd have seen them before now. Dr. Evelyn Cross floated near the console, frowning. Or maybe they've been drifting as long as we have. If that ship's in distress, we might not be the only ones running out of time. Laura's eyes narrowed. The thought was sobering. Bring us about, she ordered. Mark hesitated. Commander, we barely have power to keep life support running. If we burn even minimal thrusters to approach, we'll drain the reserves faster. I know, Laura said, steady but firm. But we're not ignoring a distress call. If that ship has working power or supplies we can salvage, it might be the only reason we live long enough to be found. Mark gave a sharp nod and set the course. The Endeavour groaned as maneuvering thrusters fired, turning the ship with agonizing slowness toward the coordinates. Every course adjustment was a reminder of how close they were to losing what little control they still had. Hours passed. The alien vessel grew from a faint shadow into a massive, looming silhouette against the stars. And then they saw it. The ship hung dead in the void, lit only by the distant light of a cold sun. Its hull was crescent-shaped, sleek and predatory, though much of its surface was blackened by scorching and impact scars. It was a beautiful design, even in ruin, long, sweeping curves instead of Terran blocky angles, with intricate markings etched into its plating like ceremonial tattoos. Whoa, Mark breathed. That's no freighter. That's a warship. Laura's gut tightened. Or what's left of one. Evelyn's voice was hushed, almost reverent. Look at those hull burns, whatever hit them, it wasn't small arms fire. Those are plasma scoring patterns. Sustained barrages. They floated in silence, taking in the eerie sight. The alien ship looked as though it had died mid-stride, its wounds still fresh. Laura made her decision. Prep the airlock. We're going aboard. Mark whipped his head toward her. Excuse me? Commander, that's insane. For all we know, whatever killed them is still out here. Which means, Laura countered, her tone sharp, we don't have time to wait and wonder. That ship might have a functioning reactor. If we can patch it into our systems, we get power back and a fighting chance. Mark clenched his jaw but said nothing more. He knew she was right. Minutes later, the three of them suited up and crossed the void in silence. The tether line between the two ships glowed faintly in the darkness, a fragile lifeline stretched across infinity. As they reached the alien hull, Laura felt the first surge of unease. The ship was massive, easily twice the Endeavor's size, and its surface was scarred with battle damage. Some areas were still faintly glowing from the heat of past impacts. Their mag boots clanked softly against the plating as they made their way toward a jagged opening in the hull, not a hatch, but a wound, blasted open by weapons fire. Laura was first through. The interior was dark. Pitch black, except for the cones of light from their helmet lamps. Dust motes floated like tiny stars in the airless corridors, catching the beams and scattering them into pale halos. "Pressure's gone," Evelyn reported quietly, her voice calm but distant over the comb. "This section's been exposed to vacuum for a while." As they moved deeper inside, the alien architecture revealed itself. The corridors were taller and wider than human design, the walls smooth and curved rather than angular. Strange glyphs were carved into the bulkheads at intervals, flowing symbols that seemed more like art than language. Then they found the first body. It floated in the center of a corridor, limp and twisted. The creature was taller than any human, with 4 arms and elongated, ridged skull. Its skin was pale and glassy, like polished stone, and its chest bore a seared hole the size of a fist. Mark froze, staring. "Holy!" "Keep moving," Laura ordered, though her throat felt tight. As they advanced, they found more bodies, some in pieces, others still clutching strange, alien weapons. The deeper they went, the more it became clear, whatever had attacked the ship had done so with precision, sweeping through room by room, leaving no survivors. Evelyn's voice trembled slightly now. This was a slaughter. Laura stopped outside a shattered doorway, scanning the room beyond. "Engine rooms ahead. Let's finish this." Inside, the alien reactor still glowed faintly, its pulsing light the only color in the otherwise dead ship. The readings on Evelyn's portable scanner spiked. "It's still active," she said, awe creeping into her tone. "Not at full output, but enough to power life support, propulsion, maybe even your comm arrays." Laura felt the first flicker of real hope since the incident. "Then we get to work. Reyes, start prepping the couplers. Cross, I want every bit of interface data you can pull from this system." The next several hours blurred into a haze of effort. The crew worked tirelessly, stringing power conduits through the breach back toward the Endeavor. It was grueling, dangerous work, every motion careful and deliberate in zero gravity, every connection tested twice before locking it down. When the last cable was secured and the reactor engaged, the Endeavor came alive. Lights flared on across the cockpit. Consoles blinked awake. The familiar hum of systems returning to life was almost deafening after so many days of silence. Laura slumped into her chair, sweat clinging to her brow beneath the helmet. For the first time in almost 2 weeks, she allowed herself to breathe a little easier. Then Mark's voice cut through the brief moment of triumph, sharp, alarmed. "Commander, we've got multiple contacts inbound." Laura jerked upright. "How many?" 6, maybe more, closing fast." Evelyn paled as the sensor readings appeared on screen. "Those are war signatures. Whoever attacked that ship. They're coming back," Laura finished grimly. And now, they knew exactly where the humans were. The warning klaxons screamed through the Endeavor, bathing the cockpit in a sickly crimson light. "Contacts closing, bearing 047, high velocity." Mark shouted over the din, gripping the console as if holding it would change the readings. 6 ships, maybe 7, fast movers. "They'll be on top of us in 8 minutes." Laura's stomach dropped. There was no mistaking the formation on the holo display, sleek, sharp signatures that matched the scorch marks on the alien warship's hull. Whoever had slaughtered its crew was coming back to finish the job. "Power down everything we don't absolutely need," Laura ordered, her voice calm despite the thundering of her own heartbeat. "Darken the ship, minimal heat, minimal profile. Maybe they'll pass us by." Mark hesitated. "Commander." Do it! The cockpit lights died, leaving only the faint glow of the emergency panels. The hum of the air recyclers dropped to a whisper. For the first time since boarding the alien vessel, the Endeavour was truly, utterly silent. The crew floated in tense stillness as the enemy ships drew closer. Evelyn whispered, if they were just scavengers, they wouldn't still be here. This feels like a patrol. Or a cleanup crew, Mark muttered. Laura didn't respond. Her hands were locked around the armrests of her chair, knuckles white as bone. The lead hostile vessel appeared on visual. Even at a distance, it was terrifying, a spear-shaped predator cutting through the void, its hull glinting with faint blue lights. Behind it, 5 more ships formed a deadly wedge. They're scanning, Mark said through gritted teeth. A beam of hard light swept across the Endeavour's hull, making the ship shudder faintly. Then, without warning, a pulse of plasma flashed past them close enough that it left a burning afterimage across Laura's vision. A warning shot, Evelyn breathed. They've got us, Mark said flatly. Laura's mind raced. They couldn't run, the patched reactor barely gave them maneuvering thrust. They couldn't fight, the Endeavour had no weapons besides a single flare launcher. Bring the comms online, Laura said finally. Mark stared at her. You want to talk to them? We're out of options. Maybe they'll accept a surrender signal. He worked quickly, fingers flying across the console. The distress call went out on every frequency they could broadcast, a simple loop in every known galactic language. This is a Terran civilian research vessel. We are unarmed. Requesting aid. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the enemy ships began to spread out, encircling them like wolves. They're not slowing down, Evelyn said, her voice tight. Laura closed her eyes. So this is how it ends. And then the stars behind them flared. New contacts. Mark's voice cracked. Multiple, no, dozens, dropping out of FTL. Bearing 180. Laura's eyes snapped open just as the holodisplay lit up with a swarm of blue transponder codes, human codes. Holy, Evelyn's breath caught. Those are Terran Navy signatures. A voice boomed through the calm and commanding. Endeavour, this is Admiral Jonathan Pierce of the United Terran Navy, Task Force Armstrong. We have you on scope. Hold position, we are engaging hostiles. Laura's hands trembled. She could barely form words. This is Commander Laura Hayes, Endeavour Actual. We'll take it from here, Commander, the Admiral said. And then the blackness of space erupted. 3 heavy cruisers emerged from the jump corridor, their hulls bristling with weapon emplacements. 5 destroyers flanked them, moving with lethal precision. At the center of the formation loomed the USS Armstrong, a massive carrier whose bulk dwarfed the Endeavour. The enemy fleet reacted instantly, breaking formation and moving to intercept. Task Force, engage, Admiral Pierce ordered, and hell was unleashed. Railguns fired first, launching tungsten slugs at a fraction of lightspeed. The first enemy ship was hit dead on, its shields collapsing in a spray of sparks before the slug tore through its hull and split it apart like an eggshell. Missiles followed, dozens of them, streaking across the void in coordinated salvos. The alien vessels responded with counterfire, beams of plasma lancing out and detonating some of the incoming warheads, but not enough. The missiles found their marks, tearing through engines, hulls, and weapon arrays. The Endeavour shook as shockwaves from the detonations rippled through space. Laura gripped her chair, watching in awe as the destroyers performed a pincer maneuver, cutting off the enemy retreat. One of the alien ships tried to break through the cordon and was shredded by overlapping flak bursts before it could clear the engagement zone. There, Mark swallowed hard, eyes wide. They're winning. Laura didn't dare look away. The battle was brutal, fast, and one-sided. One by one, the hostile ships were either destroyed or disabled, until only debris and fire floated where the enemy fleet had been. The silence that followed was deafening. Commander Hayes, Admiral Pierce's voice came again, quieter now, the area is secure. We're sending a boarding party and medical crew to retrieve you. You did well keeping your crew alive out here. Laura let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her chest felt tight, her eyes stinging. We were dead out here, Mark said softly, almost to himself.
Dead and just didn't know it yet.
Not dead, Laura whispered, staring at the human fleet outside her viewport, her people, her salvation.
Just waiting to be found. When the Endeavour was finally pulled into the protective shadow of the USS Armstrong, Laura stood in the airlock as the boarding crew stepped through. Admiral Pierce himself was among them, tall and broad-shouldered, his presence filling the cramped corridor.
You saved your ship, Commander, he said, gripping her gloved hand firmly. Earth will remember this.
Laura nodded, unable to find her voice.
As the Endeavour was guided into formation, Laura looked one last time at the stars, the same cold, merciless stars that had surrounded them for so many nights. Now they seemed different.
Now they felt like home.